It started as a normal winter night in Chicago. Snow blanketed the quiet suburbs, streetlights flickered on West Somerdale Avenue, and the laughter of children echoed faintly from distant homes. But inside one particular house, number 8213 West Somerdale, laughter meant something else. They called him Pogo the Clown. He performed at charity events, birthday parties, and parades. Parents trusted him. Kids loved him. Yet behind the painted smile lived a man who carried a secret, darker than any nightmare. This is not a story about monsters hiding in shadows. This is a story about the monster who lived next door, John Wayne Gacy, the man who buried 33 young lives beneath his own home. Stay until the end, because understanding how he fooled an entire city might just save you from trusting the wrong smile. In the early 1970s, Chicago was a city full of promise, the heartbeat of the Midwest, thriving with construction and suburban dreams. Among the friendly faces of Norwood Park, one man stood out: John Wayne Gacy. To everyone, he was the perfect neighbor, a successful contractor, a community volunteer, and even a local politician. He hosted neighborhood barbecues, helped the elderly fix their homes, and dressed as a clown named Pogo to entertain children at hospitals. But something sinister was happening beneath that charm. Between 1972 and 1978, dozens of teenage boys and young men began to vanish across Cook County. They were sons, brothers, and friends. Last seen near job sites, bus stops, or at parties where Gacy happened to appear. Police believed they were runaways, victims of the turbulent youth culture of the 70s. No one imagined they were vanishing into the basement of a man they trusted. The truth began to unravel in December 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Peist, a bright young boy with dreams of saving for college, disappeared after telling his mother he was going to meet Gacy about a construction job. He never came home. When detectives knocked on Gacy's door, they found a smiling man, offering them coffee and conversation. But something inside that house, a faint, nauseating odor, told them that this was no ordinary missing person case. It was the beginning of one of the most horrifying criminal investigations in American history. It began quietly, a few missing posters, a few grieving families. In early 1972, Chicago police noticed a strange pattern. Young men, often between 15 and 21, disappearing without a trace. Some were construction helpers, others high school dropouts or drifters looking for work. They vanished from bus stations, convenience stores, or parking lots. And almost all of them had one thing in common. The last person to see them alive was John Wayne Gacy. Gacy owned a small contracting business called PDM Contractors. He paid well, offered quick jobs, and drove a black Oldsmobile with his company logo proudly painted on the side. For struggling boys in suburban Chicago, it seemed like a chance, a trustworthy man giving them honest work. But once they stepped inside 8213 West Somerdale Avenue, they never walked out again. Gacy's neighbors recalled seeing teenage boys coming and going at all hours. Some heard faint laughter, others the muffled sound of digging late at night. When questioned, Gacy brushed it off. "I'm doing home repairs." He even charmed the local police, hosting fundraisers and attending political dinners in the same week he was disposing of bodies. As the number of missing boys grew, Chicago's fear spread like wildfire. But no one connected the dots. Gacy remained the perfect citizen, the man who made everyone laugh. What nobody knew was that the laughter echoing from his basement wasn't from children anymore. It was from the devil himself, amused at how blind the world could be. The basement of 8213 West Summerdale looked ordinary. A few tools, a workbench, the scent of damp concrete.
But beneath the wooden floorboards was a labyrinth of horror. Gacy called it his crawl space. To him, it was both a hiding place and a tomb. He would lure his victims there under the guise of a game. "Let me show you a trick," he'd say, his grin painted in red and white. He'd hand them a pair of shiny handcuffs, demonstrating how he could slip free with ease. Once the boys tried it on themselves, the illusion turned deadly. "The trick," he'd whisper, "is that only I have the key." Then came the rope. Gacy would loop it around their necks, twisting it slowly with a wooden stick he called the tourniquet. He didn't just kill, he performed. Some victims begged, some prayed. Gacy hummed circus tunes as the life drained from their eyes. Afterward, he would drag the bodies downstairs, cover them in lime, and dig shallow graves beneath his floor. When space ran out, he began throwing others into the nearby Des Plaines River, believing the water would wash away his sins.
The smell eventually grew unbearable.
Friends mentioned it, plumbers complained. Gacy blamed the sewer system, spraying gallons of disinfectant to mask the rot. But no amount of air freshener could hide what was festering below. Every shovel of earth he turned was another secret, another voice silenced forever under his home. A house built on death itself. By 1975, the disappearances had become a dark rhythm in Chicago's northern suburbs. Parents searched, detectives filed reports, and newspapers printed names. Yet no one suspected John Wayne Gacy. How could they? He was a man of influence, a respected business owner, a friendly neighbor who shook hands with politicians and handed out balloons to children. Gacy's charm was his camouflage. He donated to the Democratic Party, even posed for photos with the First Lady, smiling proudly in his tailored suit. His home, filled with trophies, clowns, and political memorabilia, painted a picture of success, not slaughter. Some workers at PDM contractors whispered about strange smells and late-night digging, but fear kept them quiet. Others had noticed that young employees vanished suddenly, always with a flimsy excuse. "He ran off with a girl," Gacy would laugh. Neighbors sometimes complained about a stench in summer, something rotten seeping from the ground. "Must be the sewers," Gacy told them, lighting another cigarette. His confidence disarmed everyone. He had convinced not just his neighbors, but the entire community that he was harmless. Even when police briefly questioned him about a missing boy, Gacy laughed it off. "You're wasting your time, officer," he said. "I'm not your man." And they believed him. It was a time when no one wanted to imagine evil living next door, especially not behind a clown's painted grin. The silence of the community became the soil that allowed Gacy's crimes to grow, body by body, night after night. December 11th, 1978. Snow fell quietly over the Des Plaines suburb. At a small pharmacy, 15-year-old Robert Peast finished his shift. He told a coworker, "There's this guy offering a job. Pays double what I make here." The man's name was John Wayne Gacy. Robert never returned home. His mother reported him missing that night, insisting her son wasn't a runaway.
Detective Lieutenant Joseph Kozenczak from the Des Plaines Police Department took the case personally. He remembered Gacy, the cheerful contractor, the clown at charity events. On paper, Gacy looked harmless, but something didn't feel right. When officers visited Gacy's house, they noticed a foul odor, like rotting meat. Gacy laughed it off. A dead animal under the house. But his stories didn't add up. Background checks revealed a disturbing record. A previous conviction for sexually assaulting a teenage boy in Iowa. Detectives began surveillance. They watched as Gacy came and went at odd hours, drinking heavily, driving aimlessly. Then one night he invited them in for coffee, and one officer nearly vomited from the stench. Gacy's hands trembled, his jokes forced. Something inside that house was alive, or dead. A search warrant soon followed. Officers entered the crawl space, flashlights cutting through the darkness, and there it was. A single human bone protruding from the dirt. That fragment shattered 6 years of silence. The clown's painted smile had finally cracked, and beneath it was the face of America's most horrifying killer. December 22nd, 1978. A date Chicago would never forget. Police flooded 8213 West Summerdale Avenue, armed with shovels, evidence bags, and masks to battle the stench that poured from below. What began as a missing person investigation had turned into a descent into hell itself. The crawl space was barely 3 feet high. Officers crawled on hands and knees, scraping through damp earth. Within minutes, they uncovered skeletal remains. Then another. And another. Limbs intertwined. Skulls half buried. Scraps of clothing still clinging to bone. It was a mass grave beneath a man's living room. Gacy watched from the window as his secret surfaced, smoking calmly. "You'll find more," he told them. "Under the hallway." He spoke as if giving directions to a garden, not a cemetery. Day after day, the body count rose. 26 victims were pulled from beneath the house, 3 more from the yard, and 4 others later found in the Des Plaines River. Many were so decomposed that identification took years, some only recognized through dental records or jewelry. Neighbors stood in silence as bags carried out what once were sons, brothers, and friends. Reporters swarmed. Television cameras rolled. America stared in disbelief. When the last body was lifted, Gacy's house stood empty. A hollow shell of evil. The foundation was stained with human decay. The floor forever cursed by what it had hidden. The house of the clown would soon be demolished, but its shadow would linger in every child's nightmare. When John Wayne Gacy was arrested on December 21st, 1978, he didn't scream, didn't resist, didn't even seem surprised. Sitting in the interrogation room, he asked for a cigarette and a cup of coffee. "There are bodies under my house," he said calmly, as if discussing a construction project. Detectives stared in disbelief. Gacy then spent hours describing how he killed, how he played his handcuff trick, how he strangled his victims with a rope, how he buried them under the floor. He spoke without emotion,
switching from humor to cold detachment in seconds. It was the first glimpse into his fractured mind. The investigation that followed was one of the most complex in U.S. history. Cook County Sheriff's Office, Des Plaines Police, and the FBI worked around the clock to identify the victims. Some families had waited years for answers. Others would wait decades.
Forensic experts pieced together bones like puzzles. Each new name added to the tally of 33 souls silenced by one man. In February 1980, the trial began at the Cook County Criminal Court. The media called it the Clown Trial. Reporters from around the world filled the courtroom, sketching the smiling killer sitting between his defense attorneys. The prosecution painted Gacy as a predator who killed for pleasure, a man who hid behind makeup and politics. The defense argued insanity, claiming Gacy suffered from multiple personalities, one good, one evil. But witnesses, including surviving victims and police officers, described a man who was perfectly aware of his actions. As prosecutors displayed photos of the bodies and maps of the crawl space, jurors turned pale. One detective testified, "The smell. It was like death itself crawling up from the ground." After weeks of testimony, closing arguments began. The state demanded justice for 33 victims.
Gacy, smiling faintly, whispered to his lawyer, "They'll never kill me. I'm too important now." On March 13th, 1980, after only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty on 33 counts of murder. The sentence? Death by lethal injection. Gacy spent the next 14 years on death row at Menard Correctional Center, painting portraits of clowns, Jesus, and skulls. His artwork was sold for thousands, horrifying families of his victims. Reporters visited him, psychologists studied him, and Gacy basked in the attention. "I'm not the monster they think I am," he said in one interview. "I only killed those who deserved it." On the night of May 9th, 1994, Gacy ate his final meal. A bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, fried shrimp, French fries, and a Diet Coke. He smiled for the cameras one last time before being escorted to the execution chamber. At 12:58 a.m., May 10th, 1994, as the chemicals flowed into his veins, Gacy's last words were cold and defiant. "Kiss my ass." He died minutes later. Outside the prison, families of the victims cheered, wept, and held candles. Justice, though long delayed, had finally come. But the question lingered in America's mind. How could a man like Gacy exist? A killer hiding behind the mask of a clown, a neighbor, a friend. The laughter had ended, but the echo of it would haunt the nation forever. The case of John Wayne Gacy left scars not only on Chicago, but on the soul of an entire nation. It shattered the illusion that evil could be easily recognized, that monsters wore ugly faces and lurked in dark alleys. Gacy proved otherwise. He was polite, charming, generous, and beloved by his community. He was the American dream, until the mask came off. Psychologists later diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, a mind incapable of empathy or remorse. But beyond the diagnosis lay a deeper truth. Gacy was a master manipulator, a man who understood trust as a weapon. He built his house on lies and cemented his crimes beneath it,
literally and figuratively. The tragedy of his victims reminds us that danger often hides behind familiarity. The people we think we know best can be the ones who harm us the most. In the 1970s, families didn't have social media or instant alerts. They trusted faces, handshakes, reputations. That trust cost 33 young men their lives. Even today, the site of 8,213 West Summerdale Avenue is gone, demolished, erased from the map. But neighbors still say that on quiet nights, when the wind moves just right, the air carries something cold, metallic, a whisper of what once was buried there. So if you ever hear laughter that feels wrong, if someone seems too perfect, remember this story. Evil doesn't always come with a snarl. Sometimes it smiles and offers you a helping hand.
And now to you, the listener. Where are you hearing this story from? Are you at home? On the road? Maybe scrolling through your phone before bed? Think about the people around you. The ones who make you laugh, who seem ordinary. What do you really know about them? If this story made you think twice, leave a comment and tell us your thoughts. Like, share, and subscribe to Crimes That Shocked the World, where we expose the darkness that hides behind everyday faces, because knowing the truth doesn't just satisfy curiosity. Sometimes it saves lives. The laughter of a clown will never sound the same again.